Okay, so let's start. And so this conversation started for some questions that Clement had
Yes.
on capitalism and consumerism.
Mhm.
So I would say that to proceed with order, let's do this thing so we no lecture, no slides, but more in a Socratic way. So rather than answering you with answers, I will answer you with questions.
Mhm.
So I will try to put questions to you. So then by going back like a regression style, we
Mhm.
try to find the answer to the original question, which is if capitalism drives to consumerism. So in this question, there are involved two important words, which in order, if we want to find the answer to the question, I think is important to give, to try to define properly these two words. So let's start with the easiest one, which is consumerism. How would you define consumerism?
Mhm. Yeah. I think for me, when it comes to consumerism, it's less of a solid thing and it's more of a culture in a sense. In let's say in any society, I feel like consumerism is less is more of a culture of the people being constantly driven to purchase items not by the virtue of the item being how to say beneficial to them in a sense or a necessity, but more towards the uh, uh purchasing the items as a want in a sense.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think
I
that's
agree
kind of it.
with Clement. And for me, I think I look at consumerism as more of like a behavior that can be analyzed through what humans do when they see when there's a certain trend on the market, and then consumerism is the effect of the trends
Hmm.
on market, and then how purchasing power comes to as a process lah of consumerism. When there's purchasing power, there's consumerism. That's my thoughts on it.
Okay. The others? Any thought from Ashlyn, Lakshmi, Shruti?
I agree with Clement and Sri on this. I think it's culture and the behavior in the sense that, it's just you want to own more things because it's sort of, it's seen as better. People want more things, people want to consume more. So it's both the behavior and like a sort of culture, especially I feel like now.
I think also it's something that's very ingrained in everyone, like in today's world with all this, how to say, dependency, like across countries and all these trading, consumption, and all that.
Mhm.
Ashlyn, do you want to add anything?
For me, I think consumerism is a self-driven behavior that is influenced by the cultural and social perspective, which would drive what kind of consumption of goods and services that people would choose.
Hmm. Okay, so if I try to summarize your thoughts, what you see in consumerism is purchasing goods and services in somehow disconnection with necessity. Is
Yeah,
that correct?
I think yeah, I think to a certain extent. I mean, for me, I think it is that way, but it's also to an extent where it's excessive, where the idea of necessity gets completely almost thrown out the window in favor of want in that sense for the next best thing. Like, I think for me, an example that I would give is like, let's say nowadays, you know how the even like the chicken egg market has become kind of like, oh, this egg yolk has extra orange in it. And it's like it's extra orange, so it must be better, right? Kind of thing. Or even to a certain extent, the prices itself makes consumers want to buy it because they look at it as something high class or something good in that sense. It becomes less of a understanding of it being a necessity and more of like, I want this because this is the next best thing. And it becomes a vicious cycle. Or maybe not vicious, but it becomes a cycle of just wanting the next best thing over and over and over again. Yeah.
Okay, so the next question on this is how do we distinguish a necessity from something that is not a necessity? One. And two, who decide that? So don't take me wrong. I mean, so as a preliminary thing, I'm probably I even don't, if I see a queue in a restaurant, while many people will go there precisely because there is a queue, I'm rather run away and go to the restaurant where there is the less number of people. You will never see me queuing to buy the next iPhone, and I'm so even lazy that even if my phone, like I brought this because I need a bigger screen because of my eyes, and as you can see, it cannot open completely anymore. Now it stands like this, it's broken. But I'm so malicious to go to a shop that is crowded in a shopping mall that I rather keep it broken than get it fixed. So don't see me as someone that want to defend uh, uh, extra consumption or something like that. But uh, and I tend to hate people that goes to crowded places, and my desire for Sunway Pyramid can be summarized by the Apocalypse Now scene where the American army comes with the airplane over the jungle of Vietnam and throw down napalm and you know, and everything get destroyed. So that is the feeling that Sunway Pyramid arise in my heart. Destruction, you know, go with please. So I'm not a great consumer. If it was up to me, certain things would not exist at all. But the question remains, and is very important, in particular if we are going to become economists or policymakers, is how do we really distinguish something that can be considered a necessity and something that instead is not a necessity, number one. And number two, because here there is a moral judgment involved in this. Who is in charge for deciding that?
Hmm. Hmm.
There's Ashley may say, I want the new iPhone. I want it. Uh, who is going to say to, I mean, apart from her wallet, who else is going to say to Ashley, no, this is superfluous for you, it's not necessary, you don't buy it. Who has the moral ground to judge the way in which Ashley decides how to spend her money, supposedly that she has the money, so to do that and say that that drive that she feels for that new phone is wrong or misplaced.
Hmm.
Is there an objective ground to decide what is superfluous, what is unnecessary, and what is necessary? Remember,
Being an
remember these things
individual.
that happen very much during COVID. when, if you remember, businesses were divided into essential businesses and non-essential businesses. So, and I always made the example of the barber. I may say that I may agree, let's say, with the government that I can live without cutting my hair. But how can the barber live without cutting hair?
Mm.
So who is morally justifiable to say to the barber, you can live for 2, 3 months, 1 year without earning a living because you are not essential. And so government decide that you are not that your survival, the survival of your family, is not necessary.
Mm. Mm. I think, yeah, I understand what you mean. Because I think in terms of, I mean, from what I remember also, in terms of like when communism was actually tried in many countries, I remember, if I'm not mistaken, there was this whole genes thing.
Which is?
Where basically, because I think, I can't remember if it was the USSR or something, had to basically just import like thousands and thousands and thousands of genes, like blue genes.
Yeah, blue jeans. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, in the USSR because of the want.
Yeah, because
Mhm.
in fact, and
Mhm.
this is typical in every kind of dictatorship where production is constrained and the government decide you have to be contented with this,
Mhm.
black markets flourish.
Yeah.
In example, under communism, religious books were forbidden because communism is a totalitarian religion and therefore cannot accept the competition of other religions. And therefore, all the religions were banned and are banned in communist countries.
Mhm.
And therefore, I remember there was in USSR a very flourishing black market for Catholic books
Mhm.
because the people were still secretly. So here we see the first critical point of this discussion that consumerism is a word that implies a moral judgment. And, and I had also a preliminary conversation on this with Ashley and Suyen last time we met. Um, when there is a moral ground, we have to be very careful because that is something that pertain our personal choices. And we may decide that something we do in our life is not consistent, in example, with the spiritual attitude that we are looking for, but that is a conversation that we have with people from our spiritual community. And so I may have, like now in 2 days, we Christians start the fasting and penance month called Lent, but it's not the government telling me what should I renounce during these 40 days as part of my spiritual education, but it's something I decide with my spiritual director. And the big difference is that if I fail to commit to that, I have consequences in the relationship with me and my spiritual director, but I don't go to jail. While if that moral judgment is done by the political authority, then the transgression of that, the government says you must eat only pizza once a week because that is not consumerism, and more than a pizza a week become consumerism and become greed and gluttony. Then if you eat the second pizza, then you go to jail or you get a fine.
Mm.
You see where's the danger is to transposing the moral ground to the political ground.
Mm.
Because then it implies coercion and violence. So ultimately, a negation of individual liberties.
But
Yeah, please. Go ahead.
Because I think bringing it back a bit, I think because the idea that I have is that not to say that we need to change political ideas to negate consumerism in a sense, because consumerism, yes, I mean, then we go into the discussion that we've been having is whether consumerism is a good or bad thing. And I think the conclusion we come to is in the sense where how can we really say whether it's good or bad in the sense? Because ultimately it's your own decision to a certain extent. But I think what I am looking at in terms of how capitalism drives or eventually turns into consumerism, I think what the idea that I had was that it's not that capitalism is capitalism is something that that consumerism is something is bad and we shouldn't have capitalism because it ultimately turns into consumerism. But what I was thinking is more of that because of the way capitalism is structured, it's not to say that it's a bad thing or a good thing, but because it's structured, it eventually evolves into a certain form of consumerism. Yeah.
Okay, before going that, let's close the chapter on consumerism. Then
Yeah.
we will go to the definition of capitalism, and then we will try to see if there is a relationship between the two things. So can we wrap up this reasoning on consumerism, saying that we all intuitively perceive that certain things may be a necessity, some other things may not be, but ultimately this is a matter of personal choices or personal preferences.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And obviously, this is dictated not only from, and it's very much related with microeconomics, it's not only dictated by our consumption preferences, which are formed in a very complicated way, but also by our budget constraint, like something that when you have a certain income, you think is a necessity, and therefore you buy it. The moment in which your income declines, then you make choices. Obviously, there is a part of income that make the selection of your necessity very very contingent, so and your preferences, and you may discover also. I mean, sometimes in a moment of difficulty, you may find that maybe certain things that before you were believing were essential, they are not. When I lost my job 2 years ago, I cut Netflix, in example. I live perfectly fine without it. So, probably I'm not going to restart, even if now my situation changed. I'm not restarting it because I discovered. But that is a matter of personal choices and personal discovery. Okay. Any other things on this point before we move to capitalism? Okay. Okay. So now comes the complicated part. In one of my books, I propose to abolish the word capitalism. So, what is capitalism? Now I want to hear really from everybody a definition, whatever you have in mind about the word capitalism, which has etymological root, capital, no, of course. So, what is capitalism?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it kind of I think it depends on the what do you call it, I think it's actually heavily dependent on the time period also. because I feel like to a certain extent, modern day capitalism cannot be compared to what was the original idea of what capitalism was, or it used to be, or was originally supposed to be. So it's quite hard to say because dependent on how you define capitalism, also it changes the whole discussion.
Yeah,
Yeah.
precisely. That's why
Yeah.
I'm making this question, because
Hmm.
we are pointing finger here. Let's say capitalism eventually drive to consumerism. We have come out somehow with a sort of understanding of consumerism, but how can we connect the two things if we miss the understanding of the two items?
Mhm.
So does the stack taste better with pepper or not? If we don't know what a stack is or what pepper is, then we cannot know.
Hmm. Well, I think from my understanding of, or from my idea of what capitalism is, I think the most general statement that I can make is that capitalism is a political idea that not to say necessitates, but is built on individuality in a certain sense, where every individual has the right to, in terms of, let's say, if you're talking about in terms of economy, sorry, but I think to a certain extent, when it comes to, let's say, in terms of economy, it's the right for every individual to be a competitor in the market, or to basically be an individual, to do your own thing, to produce your own thing, and to own something. I mean, if you go down to the basic thing, is like owning the means of production.
Mhm.
Yeah. But when it comes to, let's say, the political aspect of it, I think it also heavily falls under the belief of freedom in terms of being the individual, being able to
Mhm.
impose your own so-called will on the overall like the overall process of how everything works in a sense.
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to hear also from the others.
For me, when I think of capitalism, the immediate word that comes up to my next is definitely also it's freedom from the government. There's no governmental intervention, and the market itself it's purely controlled by the private sectors, and that the market it is determined. The market determines the value of goods and services of the product, and it is free from any restrictions, barriers, and what a capitalist society do is they want to make the best interests or profits out from a society or a community. That's what I think when I think of capitalism.
Okay. Winston, we haven't heard your voice yet.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello. Okay. The capitalist in traditional definition is more like an industrialist. Like for example, Andrew um, Carnegie and John Rockefeller. They do like certain monopolies in their own different industries. Like Rockefeller, he do oil industries in that time, which he earned a lot of wealth that industry itself. While for the modern definition of capitalism is like more like private ownership and like um you own a certain resources or machinery or businesses, and it's often driven by market, which is a free market and it competes in an open market without relying on the government control. And basically, capitalism nowadays is just more related to power of money, how it works for certain stocks and real estate. and also others like industry that could bring profit to the individuals. Yeah, that's how I define like the capitalist for myself. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Shruti?
For me, when I think capitalism, the first thing that comes to mind is profit. I guess for me, I follow a very like traditional definition. So just businesses and individuals like owning, controlling, I guess, the resources, and the end goal is being to generate as much profit as they can. So and everything that comes with it, so like free markets, private ownership, like very limited or like no government intervention type of stuff.
Who's next? Shruti?
I can go next. I think
Okay.
just very similar to everyone else. When I think about capitalism, I'm actually reminded of my Form 4 textbook where we learn about system pasaran bebas. Yeah, so it talks about how capitalist is the only market that is free and without any government intervention. So
Which
individuals
which
can
book is that?
choose.
Which book is that?
My Form 4 textbook.
Oh, okay, okay, okay.
Yeah.
In bahasa
So
ya?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So individuals can choose can make their own decisions while firms can make the decisions that maximize the profit. Yeah.
Okay. Who is missing? Lakshmi, yeah? Only Lakshmi.
Yeah. What comes to mind is just doing your own thing with what you have. I mean, sort of like your own world. It's a bit far-fetched, but doing your own thing with what you have and making the most out of it in simple terms.
Okay, you see that even among let's say curious students belonging somehow also to sort of elite, cultural elite that you are going to study in Nottingham, there is still so much confusion about the term. And I must say that probably there is not less confusion among the economists. There is a vague idea on a vague idea about capitalism. And if I'm not mistaken, even Marx never used this word. I remember when I wrote my book on capital. And so let's start from the word. Obviously, the word is related with capital, no? And the word takes some flavor during the late years of industrial revolution, in particular in the contraposition between capital and labor. Okay, so in the conversation has become somehow the idea that capital is dominant in capitalism at the expenses of labor. But I proposed to abolish this word because this kind of contraposition creates some confusion for two reasons. One is that, and hopefully I can convince you to agree with me, labor is also capital. So, what is capital? Capital is a series of things that we put together in a production process to produce an output over a period of time. So capital also is very subjective in the sense that if you have a coffee shop, a coffee machine is obviously capital because in your business, you use the coffee machine together with the coffee beans, together with water, and together with humans to serve coffee to your clients. So the machine, the beans, the labor, electricity, water, all these things go together into your ultimate purpose, which is serving coffee to your customers. But if you are a university professor, most probably coffee is not a capital good for you, but is a consumption good. You are ultimately a consumer. So even the definition of capital good depends very much on who is watching that good. So coffee for the owner of a coffee shop is capital. For us is consumption. The same thing with the same identical features. And a coffee machine has no value for us in terms of capital. So labor is also capital. So the contraposition between capital and labor is fictitious because the two things go together, and labor, in my view, is a subset of capital. Capital is made of money, is made of machines, is made of raw material, is made of humans. But objects becomes capital in the moment in which they are used together into a production process to obtain an output over a period of time. So you need to have certain goods that you believe to be useful to give you the output in a production process which unfold in time. And human capital enter this conversation. Is it clear, this passage? Clement, clear?
Yeah.
Okay. So usually, and it's something that more or less you all have touched, this contraposition between private business economic system, private enterprise, and somehow government direction. So capital applies to both systems, both in the case in which, let's say, the means of production or the result, the profit, ends up in the hands of individuals that owns the businesses, and in the case in which the results of the economic activity, the profit, goes in the hands of government. Okay? There is no difference in the technical way in which the production process is implemented. In order to make coffee, a private entrepreneur and a public company, they need the same ingredients, right? They need the same capital. So both free market economy and a centrally direct economy are capitalist in the sense that they use capital in order to produce an output. If we use capitalism in relation with its etymology, its origin, which is capital.
Mhm.
So every economy requires capital. Even you yourself on an island, the classical example of Robinson Crusoe, if you spend your life taking berries to survive, but then you want to get fish, then you need to collect more berries, to save some berries and occupy part of your time to build a fishing stick, which become your capital goods for you to fish, and you are alone there. So in order for us to do something, we need to put together elements which are physical elements, human elements, creative elements, money, to obtain what we want. Yeah?
Mm. Mhm.
This is part of everything, part even of inviting someone to go out. You know, you need to put together the car, the money for the cinema or for the pizza, and this kind of thing. So that process of utilizing different things into a production process to achieve a goal over time is implied in everything we do. Okay?
Mm.
So the real distinction is not between capitalism and non-capitalism, but the real distinction is between a free market economy, so a market in which decisions are driven by the price mechanism, which we can define a bottom-up system. So the decisions are dispersed. People make decisions in the market. And a top-down economy, in which decisions on what to produce, how much to produce, which price are taken from the top down by a controller, by a central planner. Okay? So the real clash is not between having capital or not having capital, but decisions about capital are done dispersed from the bottom up or are made centrally from the top down. Okay? Is it clear?
Yeah. Yeah.
So now, if we embrace this definition and let's say we replace capitalism with a free market economy, defined as a system of decentralized decisions, decentralized economic decisions, can we say that a system of decentralized economic decisions drive to consumerism? That's the
Okay.
question.
Mm.
And eventually a system of centrally planned economy in which all the decisions are taken by a central planner is not driving to consumerism?
Mm.
So can see how, and I think this should be part of what we call the economic way of thinking. This way of putting things is less ideological, less colorful, if you want, more dry, but brings down the things to the technical level. So is there something in a centrally in a bottom-up and decentralized economic system that creates an incentive toward the people, for the people to get uncontrolled consumption desires, which instead is not present in a centrally planned economic system?
I think for me, the idea that I have is that it, to a certain extent, yes. Because I feel like I think to like put it into to like just a phrase is that consumerism feels like to use your not the term of capitalism anymore, but to use the term of free market maybe. But consumerism feels like professional free market. It's like free markets done professionally. As in because of how let's say consumerism basically utilizes what people want in a sense, what becomes most profitable in a system such as free markets becomes consumerism, because in order to get more profit you need to have people to want to buy your product. So what happens is that you, of course, you try to, how do you make people want your product? Then you think of different ways. You can market it, you can advertise it and stuff like that. But I think it's come to a point where they've used that, where the advertising has become so deeply ingrained into our culture that it has led to this consumerist behavior in a sense. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think here there is the disconnection here is on the fact that, and this is typical actually of every generation, we tend to look at the past as a period in which things were better and certain bad habits were not present. So ultimately, the practice of attracting, I mean, the moment in which you have a business, and I think you are attaching a negative meaning to the word profit, but this is a part of a cultural heritage. But profit is the basic element that grants the survival of our society. If we don't have profit, we all go into starvation and, we are all dead and society extinguish. So profit is an extremely positive element. And obviously, in the moment in which you have a business, you need to make sure that your revenues are higher than a cost, which is the definition of profit, because otherwise you close shop. And this is not simply to make you rich, but also to pay your employees. Because let's not forget that if an enterprise closes down, the people that pay the highest cost usually is not the entrepreneur that may have some savings, but are the workers that lose their job. And what maintains the possibility for a business to keep on staying in the market is the ability to make a profit, which is having made the right entrepreneurial decisions. Without profit, tutup. So, and means people lose jobs.
Yeah.
So, unfortunately, we come in an era in which profit has got this negative definition, while instead, as Milton Friedman was used to say, the only true corporate social responsibility is to make profit, because that's what grants survival for you and your employees and your families and the families of your employees and all the families that are fed through our purchasing acts. Okay, so ultimately, even buying something that could be extremely superfluous under certain perspective, still giving a living to someone. So somehow, indirectly, buying a yacht could be an act, a charitable act, in the sense that you grant the survival of the people that are implied in the whole value chain that brought to the construction of that yacht. So the people that buy luxury goods are the people that maintain more people alive.
Well,
You
yes, I understand what you mean. Yeah, I definitely understand what you mean. But like you said, profit is twofold. It's how much you earn and how much you minus how much you lose, kind of thing, in that sense. Where in order to, because when you're producing something, also there's also a cost to it.
Yes.
Where I think the problem in nowadays in the modern society is that they are trying to cut the cost too much while trying to maximize the sale of the thing. So what ends up happening is, I mean, in modern days, it's less of maybe theoretical side, but in practice nowadays, what tends to happen is all of the, well, as the jokes say, the Chinese sweatshops and all of those
But
aspects.
this is a tendency that is normal for a business, in the sense that obviously, if you want to grow, you have to find a way to be sustainable in the market, and then means either increasing revenues or cutting costs. But making more profit is also necessary for long-term strategies. I give you a very practical example. The last company where I worked before going to the company that scanned me, so a company where I worked for 8 years, invested in a unit in Malaysia that created jobs and spillover and etc. And that unit in Malaysia was providing part of the services to customer for free. This is not because the company is a charity or want to do something. It's a very good strategy, because by providing service for free, okay, you are able to make your customer loyal in the long run. So the customer knows that if your machine breaks down, you can send a technician to repair it, and the customer will not have to pay anything. Okay? But and the company were paying technicians to be available for doing that. And when the technicians go, they get paid. So the company doesn't get paid by the customer, but the technicians want to be paid. So how could the company afford to give that service for free to the customer? By making more profit. And that allowed to invest in a service structure which didn't generate a result immediately, but generated over the long term. And over the long term, the company can stay in the market for longer. Companies that have a much lower margin cannot afford to do that kind of investment. Therefore, they lose market share. And therefore, after a while, they are out of the market with the people losing their jobs. So when you will go to work, you will find out that business strategy is a complex thing, and you see how important it is to make a profit for the long-term strategy, for the survival and for offering better service. So it doesn't mean that everybody does that. We are all humans. People do good things, other people do bad things. We live in an imperfect world. But then I want to drive you back to economics. For one thing, the problem of consumerism. So going to purchase and to desire more. Now, you all have studied the principle of diminishing marginal utility, right? What does it mean, Suen, diminishing marginal utility?
From my understanding of diminishing marginal utility is that in production, the more input, wait.
No, this is the diminishing return. The one that you are explaining is the law of the diminishing return from Ricardo. But the diminishing marginal utility related to consumers means that if you drink a glass of wine, you like. If you drink 10, you vomit.
Yeah, something like that. So it's more. That's already the perfect example. It's like when you're hungry, and then when you get one pizza, you feel satisfied. But when you get offered 5 pizzas, you feel like, oh, okay, this is a lot. And you offered 10 pizza, you wouldn't even want to eat
So the more you consume at the margin, the less the satisfaction, because your urge get fulfilled. So now think the contraposition between an economy in which goods are freely available in the market and an economy in which goods instead are not freely available in the market. And the government decide what you can have and what you cannot have. Where there will be a higher tendency or an out of order tendency to consume. In the centrally government economy, because the fact that you are forbid to consume certain things make your desire for that things even higher. And that's why we have seen as a very strong phenomenon of what you may define as consumerism in the post-communist countries. Because these were countries, the post-Soviet Union world, in which consumption were kept under a cap, like a boiling pot, for 70 years. Then all of a sudden you open the pot and the people were flooded with goods. And they reversed all their suppressed desire into consuming something that they couldn't have, and therefore they identified their happiness with the possibility to have things that for many decades were forbidden. So the disorder has not been created by capitalism or free market, but has been created by the fact that consumptions were forbidden for decades. And therefore, the moment in which the gates of paradise were open, people couldn't control it. While if you live in a system in which your goods are available, then somehow you tend to have less disorders in your desires because things are there for you any moment. And I give you a very simple example. I grew up in a household of smokers. My parents were heavy smokers. We were traveling from my hometown, Verona, in northern Italy, down to Sicily, where my grandparents were living, 1,300 kilometers, me and my sister in a car, without aircon, nothing, with my parents both smoking for 15 hours. You know? Or I was eating and my grandfather was eating and smoking and holding me on the laps, proposing me to smoke when I was 4 or 5 or something like that. So I never grew up to be a smoker. Because when my teenagehood started, my parents never forbid me to smoke. They told me, you want to smoke, you feel curious, these are the cigarettes, we teach you. So my impulse to consume something forbidden never developed because it was not forbidden. While in many cases where the parents say, if you smoke, I will beat you or I will put you in punishment like that. This is the best way to get your kids to become smokers.
As in, desire comes from what you
Because
cannot get.
the moment in which you can't get something, your desire, but this is, you have studied, it is the principle of diminishing marginal utility. When if Clement doesn't have a girlfriend, he feels a urge for a woman. But Winston, that is surrounded every day by 10 women that always want to be with him, feel less the urge for a woman because he is already full of women. Right, Winston? is a
No.
But
Okay.
so you haven't.
But it's the same concept of that.
Sorry?
But the concept is just like that, right?
For the concept,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
So indeed, it's not abundance that create disorder desires, but scarcity that make us desiring more and more, because there is nothing more delicious than what is forbidden. And this start from the year one. If you look at the Bible, God tells to Adam and Eve, you can eat whatever you want, is there, but not that apple. And what they go to eat, precisely that apple. So since the very first man and woman, it started like that, getting what is forbidden to get. So in this sense, so is for the economic side. So I believe that the point is indeed that eventually free market economy has a less tendency to create disorder desires, but ultimately what affect our impulse to purchase is culture. And culture is not created by the economic system, otherwise we become Marxist, but it's the other way around. It's our culture that determines the economic system. So we can find eventually happiness in consuming less if we want, but that is part of our personal choice, part of our spiritual path or belief path, but we can't force people on that path.
Hmm. But this is like, oh, sorry.
Yeah,
You said?
please go ahead.
Oh no, this is just a thought. But what if the desire itself to begin with is was formed in a sense by the basically by what do you call it, by a free market in a sense. So let's let me take an example of, let's say, like uh Jordans, like
Mhm.
fancy shoes nowadays. So like, you know, every time the new Yeezy comes out, everybody goes crazy. Everybody's like, "Oh, I need that new shoe immediately." But the thing is, the Yeezy itself, or the idea of it, is formed by the market. It's formed by advertising, it's formed by marketing, it's formed by all of these different aspects of of a market in order to promote the shoe and basically form the desire of the people around it.
Yes.
So in that sense, I understand that the desire comes from also from the scarcity of the item, so you cannot diminish it, or you cannot stop it from being sold because there is the desire for it. But what if the desire itself is created by the market?
The desire must be created by the market, otherwise
Mm-hmm.
businesses would remain out of business.
Yeah.
So imagine the first person that created a computer.
Mm-hmm.
This person had to convince the people that the computer was better than a typing machine.
Mm.
So convincing customers is the basic survival for every company.
Mm.
When I have a consulting company, I have to convince the people that they need my services. So this is not wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Is perfectly legitimate, and it is at the very root of the survival of every business. If you can't convince people that they need your product, that why in the first place you make a business.
Mm.
If you open a coffee shop, you must try to convince the people that your coffee is better than the coffee of the competitors. All the success of Starbucks is built on giving consumers an experience, not just the coffee. In fact, the coffee is terrible, but people go to Starbucks because they feel great in being in Starbucks.
Mm-hmm.
You may consider that feeling, like I do, stupid feeling, and so I don't go Starbucks, but I can't forbid people to
Going to
do that,
Starbucks. Mm-hmm.
and I can't forbid Starbucks to try to convince the people doing that.
Mm.
Because there is even the other process around. Think about all the Starbucks and McDonald's closing down because someone has convinced them that it's bad to consume Starbucks or McDonald's, you know. So, and
Mm.
there are people that are losing their job because of this. So there are forces, and this is the extreme example. But the moment in which you start a business, your basic necessity is to convince the people that they need your products. Otherwise, why do you do that?
Mm.
And the important thing is that there is no coercion to buy your product.
Mm.
And the market, although imperfect, like every human outcome, all the human outcomes are imperfect, is the best way for the people to say no to something that come in the market. So, and people has always followed fashions. It's not something very recent. If you look at the economic history, which is a discipline which has been killed in economic curricula, but if you study economic history, you will find that there are trends, the ways. Even if you look, one thing was a book that I always wanted to write, but I never had the chance. He studied economic history through paintings. If you look paintings, classical paintings pertaining a certain era, you will find that the people were dressing always in a certain way. And then you change era and the change. In example, the 17th century is an era in which black was dominating as a color in clothes, while before that, during the Renaissance, people tended to be much more colorful. And then at the end of the 18th century, a very famous dress that was popular for women was the Andrienne. And every lady, from the poorest to the richest, were trying to find an Andrienne. And then there were the people that could afford a very expensive Andrienne and people that could afford a cheaper Andrienne. But everybody wanted an Andrienne. So this is not new. It's part of human psychology because people tend to have an imitative spirit. You know, then there are people that choose different path, but doesn't mean that wanting what other people want is wrong, because ultimately we are social animals, so we seek approval among the others. Then there are people that care more about that, and there are people that care less, and we should avoid to be snobbish. I mean, we can have our own attitude and say, "Oh, look at that; those people are all dressed the same, and I don't like them." It's okay. We can have that feeling, but we should, I think, avoid a feeling of. I mean, we can judge them and feeling ourselves superior, but doesn't mean we are actually superior. You know? And so, ultimately, we are all human beings. And so there is nothing wrong in wanting an iPhone because other people want it. You may have a different choice, a different preference, but at the same time, there is nothing wrong in a producer of a good to try to convince other people to buy that good, because otherwise it would be out of business. I mean, advertisement is compulsory. You can't live without it, which can be in the form of posters, social media, newspaper, word of mouth. There are different advertisements that work for different industries. But ultimately, if the people don't know about your business, how can you expect to survive?
So let me try to like summarize to an extent. So like, correct me if I'm wrong. So to a certain extent, you do agree that communism, that free market eventually leads to consumerism, but your idea is that what's wrong with that in a sense?
I mean, free market makes more goods available than a centrally planned economy. People have more choice to buy things. They have abundance, and usually they have more substances, more money to buy things. And the way in which they decide how to spend their money is a matter of personal choices. So Mises always give an example. It's not a market mistake if the people prefer to buy guns over buying tickets for theater. It's a matter of culture. So the market gives the people what the people want. And people make their choices based on their tastes, expectations, plans. And look in example at the so-called sinful products, no? It can be different level of sin according to your religion that goes from alcohol to sex, okay? These are the products that have always been extremely successful in every kind of market. Even in the most ferocious dictatorship, Cuba is a country that survived over decades of communism thanks to sexual tourism.
Yeah.
Right? So probably greatest part of GDP of Cuba is being created by sexual tourism. So people find a way to consume what they want, ultimately. We can have our moral judgment, and we can try to make things better according to our moral view. But prohibition has been demonstrated not to be a very successful way to handle that things. Has failed everywhere.
Yeah.
So, and it's very important to recognize that the market doesn't produce values. The market produces things. And if those things stay in the market, ultimately is a decision. The last word is always on consumers.
Okay. Oh, interesting.
It's like for the classical example for prostitution. Prostitution will end when people will stop to desire prostitutes. So you can try to do whatever you want, but ultimately so the market produce what the people want. Ultimately, and people have always the freedom to say no. They may be influenced by advertisement, fine, but that is normal. Now the thing is just amplified by the level of technology, but you tend to look at the bad side of things, but look at the bright side of things. Technology has made advertisement extremely cheap. So people that couldn't have, I have an example. I have a friend that opened a little shop, was little, now grew, doing especially Italian sandwiches. Okay. Started as a small place in a condominium, now became a very successful restaurant in Tamandesa. I can't go to eat there because it's always too full. And this happened through advertisement in social media. So he can make good money for himself, for his family, with an investment which is within the means of a normal person. So he could challenge big businesses in a simple way. Yes, we are in a condo. It's not anymore in the condo. It's called La Spiga. Now it's in Tamandesa. So
We can
you go there to eat.
we
You
can
can
go there
make
next time.
you can make my name there. Definitely non halal. It's only pork. So this is possible. Or I can make a small consulting company with word of mouth traveling. Imagine now traveling is relatively affordable. 100 years ago was not the case. So probably I could have done 100 years ago what I'm doing now to provide for my family. So let's not look at advertisement or lure for profit as something negative. Then we can find spiritual guidance for self-restraint to do the things properly and things, but that is a matter of moral, and it's not the market that teaches us moral. I mean, but we learn that in our environments, in family, in society, through the principle of sympathy.
Interesting.
Doctor, to add something on, I actually wanted to talk about this just now when you mentioned that if for the centralized one, does it not drive to consumerism? So I actually wrote down
Yeah.
on my thoughts about it lah. Because when I think of centralized, I think of the government making decisions.
Yes.
So the government making decisions on, let's say they will be giving subsidies on what they think the people, the rakyat need. And then it also led me back to when you talked about who actually decides, what is necessity and what is not a necessity, And then my thoughts was that I don't agree that a centralized system does not drive to consumerism, because I think at the end of the day, it all comes down to something similar to what you say, human desire. I think that human desire does drive consumerism because us humans, we do make decisions based on what we want, and then based on scarcity. And
before I wanted to say that you also gave a very good elaboration already. So I felt like, it's all right, but I felt like I just wanted to say my thoughts lah. And humans, it also led me to think of the conversation we had with Ashlyn when you came to collect the paper.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned that humans are actually like pleasure seekers. We actively look for pleasure, and that your suggestion that economists should find the best way to not limit the forbidden and to find what is the best way for us to practice it without having let's say without having negative side effects,
Yeah.
because when you limit something, that makes people want it more, and that is also what cause crimes, etc. So what is the best way that we all can have practice it in, so that there won't be crimes, and what can we do legally to make it legal so that it is practiced legally? Yeah, that was my thoughts.
Yeah, that's precisely true. In fact, what we said that in fact a centrally controlled economy can drive more to consumerism because it suppressed desires that later goes completely uncontrolled. But then of course then there are personal choices always, and as you rightly mentioned, we are pleasure seekers. We can't deny that. I mean, uh, every decision we do is to go from a sense of uneasiness to a sense of being better off. Even a saint that mortify itself through physical punishment or fasting ultimately is a pain that you do because you think that is driving you closer to God. So is ultimately to achieve something more. It's not punishment in itself. Even the masochists, the people that feel pleasure in pain, they inflict pain to themselves because that pain is giving them pleasure. So every sacrifice we do is for something that we believe to be better for us, for the people we love, and etc. So ultimately we try to go. Then we make mistakes on the way, so we don't always make the right thing. That is obvious, but and that's the matter of rationality. Every time we make a decision, the decision is rational because it's consistent with what we think is the best. Then we may discover that was the wrong decision, but we discover it only ex post. We cannot know it ex ante. Cannot know it in advance. We know it only after it's done. So this is more or less. Any other thought?
Oh, wait, sorry, I got a question in terms of, so to a certain extent, do you also see it as just consumerism as just basically as a natural expression of human desire in a sense?
Yes, so somehow yes, is natural.
Okay.
In fact, again going back to economic history, in the Middle Age in Europe, the Middle Age was a long period, lasted 1,000 years, from the fall of the Roman Empire until the discovery of America. Was a period that was very much dominated in Europe by common cultural background that was the Christian background. Okay, so religion was informing every kind of aspect of society. There was the Pope as had a strong authority, and etc. So during this period, there were laws that tried to limit what were considered to be excess consumptions from the church perspective, like the people having the coach with horses. They couldn't have more than a certain number of horses or more than a certain number of decorations, or the clothes couldn't have beyond a certain number of colors. So was strictly regulated the exhibitions also of wealth. But this again was part of a cultural expression which was agreed by the people. Okay, but this is to say that that kind of questions that you have, that people may spend things wrongly or show off more than 1,000 years ago, was considered already a problem about disorder consumptions. Okay, or even for the poor, say better give the money here, because if you give it to the poor, they will spend the money drinking. So these kind of moral judgments are present in the conversation, in the ethical, politics, and economic conversation since ever. Look at Greek philosophers. I mean, all the basic of mostly Aristotle is what is just, what is the just consumption, and then the common wisdom, everything in moderation, which are all good things if we take it from a philosophical perspective for us to learn how to orient our life. But they become extremely violent if you move from you yourself using this wisdom to shape your life to the government using this wisdom to shape your life. That's the biggest difference. One of is myself saying I should eat everything in moderation because it's good for my health, and my health is precious and everything. One thing is the government saying to me, you cannot eat more than one steak a week, or so you cannot eat more than a certain amount of sugar, or you cannot drink more than a certain amount of wine, or you cannot smoke. That is the ethical state which I strongly oppose, and is not far away from where we are on smoking. We are already there. The next will be banning sugar.
I see. But I think, yeah, then that goes back to the conversation that I remember having with you a while back. It was when it comes to specific things that maybe shouldn't shouldn't be, like, let's say when it comes to drugs and all of those. I remember we had this conversation where you said maybe there's a way to redirect it, to redirect instead of stopping basically just putting a blockade on it and making sure it doesn't happen. There's a way to redirect it towards something else. But it's also a discussion where what if the damage is already done? What is that? Is that just to a certain extent, is that just like a unfortunate happenstance? Like we had to get there somehow, but we had to crack a few eggs before it happened. Or is there a way to avoid it in any way?
Well, now in certain things like drugs, I think a lot of damage has been done, both from drugs themselves, human beings, and the way in which we have tried to fight the consumption of drugs. But the fact that mistakes have been done doesn't mean that we should renounce to try a different approach. Because we are always humans, and humans, we make mistakes, but we always have the chance to restart. And that is a very difficult topic, the war on drugs, because obviously has consequences on the health of the people, but it creates a lot of criminality as well. But indeed, what if it get legalized? Then you have eliminated and you try to develop like a control consumption to try to go to a gradual cessation program, to a gradual quitting program, control. But this is always in the matter of speculations. For sure, one thing is clear, that now is not working.
Yeah.
Drugs flourish and criminality flourish together with drugs. So should at least sit down and recognize that is not working. Maybe a different approach is needed. Doesn't mean going to legalization, but means at least thinking, guys, like this doesn't work. what else we can do.
Okay.
Because keeping on doing the same things just because we don't know what else to do is not a justification to keep on doing it.
Yeah.
It's like if you have an headache and you think that in order to cure your headache, you have to bump your head against the wall. Is getting cured? No. But I don't know what else to do, so I keep on doing it. Doesn't look like a very wise choice. You should stop bumping
Yeah.
your head and thinking, and maybe ask around if there is any other way to cure your headache.
Okay. Oh.
Big thunder came in. Maybe
Oh.
you don't hear it through
Oh yeah.
the headset, but there was a flash and then
Oh yeah. I was like, what was that?
and even the alarm the
Oh.
car started. I mean, a very peaceful area here in the green, so every kind of extra noise is immediately felt, but it's very quiet. In the morning, I don't hear any car. I just wake up with the chirping of the birds. So
Oh, that's nice.
it's very nice. It's my quiet place.
Nottingham as well. Every morning around
Yes.
7 you can start hearing birds chirping. It's natural alarm.
It started around 4:30 to 5, but
Oh my goodness.
So Jakarta has been always very quiet for me. Any additional thought before we close?
No, I don't think so.
So you can start to think about the topic for the next session.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anybody have anything they're interested in?
We had a class today for Power and Contest where economic democracy was mentioned, which I thought was an interesting topic if anyone wants to talk more about that.
Economic democracy. So maybe you can prepare a little presentation and then we follow your introduction, yeah?
Wait, sorry. The economic democracy, is there a difference between economic democracy and political democracy?
I don't know what we are talking in that class, yeah? So I have no idea.
I'm not quite sure. Oh, go on.
Go always to the root of the words. So democracy comes from demos, which is the people, and kratos, which is the government. So democracy means the government of the people.
Yeah.
Demos kratos. So
okay, I guess that's something we can chew on for a while.
Yeah, and then we see what to do next. Okay, guys.
Okay.
Have a good night and thanks for this refreshing conversation.
Thank you so much, Dr. Camelo.
Thank you
for
taking
still
the
keeping in
time.
touch with us, even though
Thank you so much, Doctor.
it's really grateful.
I'm grateful also. It's very refreshing. Okay, we keep in touch and see next session what we can do. Okay.
Good rest. Thank you so much, Doctor.
Thank you, guys. Have a good
Bye.
night. Bye bye. Bye
Guys,
bye.
good night.
Bye bye.